The first man down the shaft never came back up the same. Workers had cleared rubble for 3 weeks before they found it. A staircase, hand-carved, descending into absolute black, beneath a temple that pilgrims had prayed above for centuries. Nobody knew it was there. Not the villagers, not the historians, not even the priests who lit candles on the floor directly above it every single day. For generations, when the first excavator finally reached the bottom, his torch caught something that made him drop it. Bones. Hundreds of them, stacked, arranged, deliberate. This was not a burial chamber. Burial chambers don't have chains bolted into stone walls. They don't have small rooms sealed from the outside, with no way to open them from within. And they don't have carvings on the ceiling, depicting rituals so disturbing that the research team asked to stop filming. For hundreds of years, this temple was known as a place of peace, of devotion, of light. But beneath the floor, where thousands once bowed their heads in prayer, something else was happening in the dark. Something the faithful were never meant to see. What was really happening under that temple? And why did an entire religious order spend centuries making absolutely certain no one would ever find out? To understand what was buried beneath that temple, you have to understand who built it and why they needed a floor that thick between the public and the truth. The temple complex rose centuries ago, funded by wealthy patrons who believed they were purchasing favor with the divine. Above ground, everything was designed to inspire awe. Soaring columns, gold-leafed altars, chambers built for public worship. This was the version of the story everyone was allowed to see. But religious institutions of this era operated with almost no outside oversight. The same leaders who blessed newborns and presided over funerals also controlled the only written records of what happened inside their walls. There was no council to answer to. No outside authority permitted past the gates. Whatever happened within those stones stayed within those stones by design, not by accident. Historians who study this period describe something chilling. A pattern, repeated across multiple temple sites, of construction crews being replaced before a project's completion. Workers who dug the deepest chambers rarely appear again in local records afterward. At the time, this was written off as ordinary labor turnover. Today, researchers see it differently, because when archaeologists finally cross-referenced construction records with the layout of the tunnels beneath this specific temple, they found something that stopped them cold. The lowest level wasn't part of the original architectural plan at all. It was added later, in secret, by someone with the authority to override the temple's own builders, and the power to make sure the change was never recorded anywhere official. Someone inside that temple wanted a room that didn't officially exist. Here is where the story stops being architecture and becomes something far darker. When the excavation team cataloged the hidden chamber, they didn't just find bones. They found evidence of a system, a routine, practiced and repeated over what forensic analysis suggests was decades, possibly longer. The chains bolted to the walls weren't randomly placed. They were positioned at heights consistent with restraining someone standing, someone kneeling, and disturbingly, someone very small. Fragments of fabric survived in the dry underground air, along with small personal items, suggesting the people brought here were not enemies or prisoners of war. Records pieced from surviving ledgers, kept separately from official religious texts, indicate many were taken from within the temple's own community. Devoted followers, people who trusted the leaders who brought them below. Then came the discovery that redefined everything. Carved into the deepest wall of the chamber, researchers found a second, older layer of markings beneath the visible rituals. Evidence the room had been used this way for far longer than anyone assumed, potentially generations before the secret level was even officially built over it. This wasn't one corrupt leader's crime. This was inherited, passed down, taught. Scholars reviewing the ledgers found something almost more disturbing than the chamber itself: coded language. Phrases in the official records, once believed to reference fasting or purification, matched almost exactly with terminology used in the hidden ledgers to describe what happened below. The public prayers and the private horror were being described using the same sacred words. The faithful weren't just unaware, they were unknowingly praying directly above it, using language that had been quietly repurposed to hide what their leaders were doing beneath their feet. And once historians realized that, they had to ask a much harder question. If the words were hidden in plain sight for centuries, how many other temples, in how many other places, might be built the exact same way? When the findings went public, the reaction was not what you'd expect. There was no dramatic trial, no single villain marched into a courtroom. The leaders responsible had been dead for generations by the time researchers pieced together what the chamber meant. The institution itself survived, reformed, renamed in places, its darkest chapter quietly absorbed into footnotes rather than headlines. For descendants of the communities involved, that silence was its own injustice. Families, who had unknowingly worshipped above their ancestors, suffering, were left with grief, and no one left to hold accountable. Historians describe it as reopening a wound never actually healed, simply buried, literally and figuratively, for centuries. But the story didn't end with old bones and old guilt. Investigators studying this temple began applying the same methods to other religious sites, with similarly unexplained architectural additions, sealed rooms, unofficial expansions, ledgers written in coded religious language. Several sites are now under active re-examination. The pattern uncovered here didn't just explain one temple's past, it gave researchers a blueprint for finding others. This matters today for a brutally simple reason. Institutions with unchecked power over vulnerable people and no outside oversight are not a relic of ancient history. They exist right now, in different forms, in every country on Earth. The mechanisms are the same: isolation, secrecy, trusted authority weaponized against the very people who believed in it most. The temple's darkest secret wasn't just what happened in that chamber. It was how easily it stayed hidden for so long, simply because no one thought to look beneath their feet. And that is the part that should truly unsettle you. Not the ancient horror itself, but the ordinary silence that protected it, year after year, generation after generation. Every civilization builds temples to the light. And every so often, history reminds us how much darkness can survive underneath one, protected by nothing more than reverence and silence. What happened beneath that temple wasn't unique because of its cruelty. It was unique because it was found. For every chamber uncovered, historians believe there are others still sealed, still forgotten, still waiting beneath ordinary ground somewhere right now. Power unchecked, faith exploited, silence rewarded. This pattern has repeated across cultures and centuries because we keep making the same mistake, assuming that what looks sacred on the surface must be sacred all the way down. We trust the walls we pray inside. We rarely ask what those walls were built to hide. Maybe the real lesson isn't about ancient priests at all. Maybe it's about us, and how easily we still look away from what we don't want to see, even when it's right beneath our feet. So tell me, if a secret like this could stay buried for centuries in plain sight, what else are we walking over right now, without even knowing it? Leave your answer in the comments. And if this story unsettled you the way it should, subscribe, because history is still hiding more of these than you think.